The conference chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive structure built by species that had forgotten what war meant. Helen Cross watched through the transparent walls as Verith 3 died below them. The planet cracked like an egg, its molten core bleeding into space while billions of souls screamed their last moments into the cold dark. She had seen death before, but never on this scale. Never with such casual indifference from those who could have prevented it. Around the circular table, representatives from 40 species debated in calm, measured tones. The Dravenites, tall beings of crystalline thought, expressed concern through harmonic frequencies. The choral delegation, ancient and wise, spoke of historical precedents from civilizations long dead. The Thim collective shared research data that everyone ignored. Helen sat in her designated chair, the newest member of this grand assembly, and felt rage building in her chest like a star about to explode. Ambassador Cross, you seem distressed, Chair Paven observed. The choral leader had lived for over 1,000 years, had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, and spoke with the kind of patience that made Helen want to scream. We understand this is difficult for younger species to process. Helen stood, her hands flat on the table. Difficult to process? That's the 4th world in 6 months. The 4th. And you're all sitting here discussing philosophical approaches to a crisis that's killed 18 billion people. A Dravenite scholar chimed in, their voice like bells. Violence is not the answer, Ambassador. The precursor archives warned us of the unraveling over 800 years ago. In all that time, we have sought understanding, not conflict. And what has understanding gotten you? Helen asked, do you have weapons? Evacuation protocols? Defense grids? Anything that might actually save lives? The chamber fell silent. Helen looked from face to face, seeing the same expression on each alien countenance. Confusion, as if she had suggested they drink poison or murder their young. Paven spoke slowly, as one might explain basic concepts to a child. We do not build weapons, Ambassador. Our civilizations evolved beyond such primitive impulses millennia ago. We solve problems through wisdom, through patience, through watching worlds die. Helen interrupted. She pulled up a holographic display, showing the data her colleague had sent from the research station. Dr. Zhao analyzed the pattern. The unraveling isn't random. It's accelerating. At the current rate, it will reach the core worlds within 2 years. Your worlds, the ones with trillions of citizens who think they're safe because their ancestors were wise. A young delegate from the Saren Federation, a species that had only joined the galactic community 3 centuries ago, spoke up. What would you have us do, Ambassador Cross? Humanity has been part of the galaxy for only 40 years. You cannot possibly understand the complexity. I understand that you're going to die, Helen said flatly. All of you, unless someone does something. She pulled up another image, one that made several delegates look away. Earth, 60 years ago, during the Antarctic cascade. The magnetic poles had shifted in a matter of hours, triggering volcanic eruptions across 3 continents. Tsunamis the size of mountains. Atmospheric storms that turned day into permanent night. 3 billion dead in 6 months. The survivors lived in underground bunkers, eating rations made from recycled waste, watching their children starve. This is what my world looked like when I was 10 years old, Helen said quietly. We didn't have time for philosophy. We didn't have time for understanding. We had time to dig graves and make choices that would haunt us forever. But we survived. Do you know why? No one answered. Because we were willing to do whatever it took. We implemented martial law. We triaged entire cities, deciding who got food and who didn't. We conscripted children to work in the hydroponic farms because there weren't enough adults left alive. We became monsters to survive. And I will be damned if I sit here and watch you make the same mistakes through inaction that we avoided through action. Paven's expression remained serene. Your species' trauma does not justify returning to barbarism, Ambassador. The unraveling may be reasoned with, communicated with, understood. Violence only breeds more violence. Helen laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the chamber. You don't even know what it is. Your archives say it appears every 50,000 years, consumes worlds, then vanishes. That's not a natural phenomenon. That's a pattern, a purpose, and purposes can be stopped. She pulled out a data chip and placed it on the table. I'm sending a message to Earth High Command. I'm recommending they deploy the first fleet to the next projected target zone, with or without your authorization. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted over each other in dozens of languages. The Dravenite's harmonics became discordant. Paven raised his hand, and silence fell like a hammer. Ambassador Cross, the weapons prohibition accords are clear. No member species may deploy military-grade weapons in galactic space. If humanity violates this treaty, you will be expelled from the assembly and sanctioned by every world in the community. Helen picked up the data chip. Then sanction us. At least we'll still be alive to receive the paperwork. She walked toward the exit, her footsteps loud in the shocked silence. Behind her, through the transparent walls, another world began to fragment. The sensors detected gravitational anomalies forming at its core. The unraveling was coming again. Helen sent the encrypted message as she boarded her shuttle. For words that would change everything. They won't fight. Prepare protocol absolute. The response came back within an hour. Fleet mobilizing. God help us all. Helen looked out at the stars and wondered if God was listening, or if humanity was about to prove that sometimes salvation required damnation. The command bunker sat 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, carved from solid granite during the worst years of the Cascade. Admiral Rita Foster remembered when they built it, remembered the sound of drilling machines working 24 hours a day while the world above burned and froze and drowned all at once. She had been a lieutenant then, young and stupid enough to believe humanity would recover quickly. 60 years later, she knew better. Recovery was a lie. Survival was the only truth that mattered. The holographic display showed Helen's message floating above the conference table, for words that Rita had been expecting for months. Around her, the military commanders of Earth's defensive forces sat in silence, their faces grim. They all knew what was coming. They had all prepared for this moment. Opinions, Rita said, not because she needed them, but because protocol demanded it. General Omar Hassan spoke first. The old man had lost his entire family in the Cascade, had spent 40 years building Earth's secret arsenal. We deploy. The galaxy won't protect itself, and we're next on the menu if this thing keeps spreading. The political ramifications, someone began. Rita cut them off. There won't be any politics if we're all dead. Next, Dr. Lin Zhao appeared on the screen, transmitting from her position embedded with the THIM research teams. Her face was haggard, eyes red from lack of sleep. I've analyzed 17 different data sets from the affected worlds. The unraveling isn't a natural phenomenon. It's a machine, a weapon, something designed to prevent younger species from advancing beyond a certain technological threshold. The room erupted in questions. Rita let them talk for 30 seconds, then slammed her hand on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Zhao, explain in terms that soldiers can understand. The physicist nodded. Imagine a trap set 50,000 years ago. Every time a civilization reaches a certain level of development, the trap activates. The unraveling appears, consumes their worlds, harvests the energy, then goes dormant again. It's not trying to communicate. It's exterminating threats to whoever built it. Who built it? Hassan asked. A species that's been dead for millions of years. The precursor archives mention them only in fragments. They were paranoid, terrified that younger races would surpass them. So they built a solution, an automatic genocide machine that triggers every time someone gets too advanced. Rita felt cold settling into her bones. And the galactic community knows this. The elder species suspected. But they censored the archives, hid the truth from themselves because accepting it would mean accepting that violence was necessary. They chose comfortable lies over difficult truths. Rita looked around the table at her commanders. Hard men and women who had survived the worst catastrophe in human history. People who understood that sometimes the right choice was also the terrible choice. Fleet status, she ordered. First fleet ready for deployment, Hassan reported. 50 ships. Full combat loadout. Relativistic kinetic missiles, quantum disruption warheads, AI battle networks. Everything the weapons prohibition accords forbid. Good. How long until the fleet can reach the next target zone? Zhao's projections put the next attack at the Varith system. We can be there in 70 hours if we push the drives to maximum. Rita stood, walking to the holographic display. She manipulated the controls, showing the predicted spread of the unraveling over the next 2 years. Red zones bloomed across the galaxy like a plague, consuming world after world. At the current rate, Earth would be threatened within 18 months. I lost my children in the cascade, Rita said quietly. My daughter was 7. My son was 4. They were in the coastal evacuation zone when the tsunamis hit. I got the call 3 days later. Their bodies were never recovered. No one spoke. Everyone in the room had similar stories. The cascade had carved pieces from all of them. I swore that day that I would never let an action kill anyone I could save, Rita continued. The galaxy calls us primitive, violent, barbaric. They're right. We are all of those things, but we're also alive, and we will keep being alive by doing what they refuse to do. She turned to face the commanders. Authorize fleet deployment. Full combat protocols. Rules of engagement. Destroy any unraveling entities on site. Protect civilian populations by any means necessary. If the galactic community tries to stop us, avoid conflict if possible. But if they insist, disable their ships and continue the mission. Hassan pulled up a secondary display. Admiral, there's one more thing. We've detected unusual readings from multiple sectors. The unraveling isn't just appearing in one location anymore. It's spreading faster than predicted. We're looking at multiple simultaneous attacks. How many fleets can we deploy? We have second and third fleets in reserve. But that's it. That's everything we've built in 40 years of secret construction. 90 ships total against an enemy that destroyed 4 worlds without any resistance. Rita smiled, a cold expression that held no humor. Then we make every shot count. Launch first fleet immediately. Bring second and third to combat readiness. And Hassan, yes, Admiral, make sure every ship commander understands the stakes. We're not fighting for glory. We're not fighting for honor. We're fighting because someone has to, and no one else will. Understood. Rita returned to her seat, feeling the weight of command settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. In 70 hours, humanity would commit its first act of interstellar warfare. The galaxy would condemn them. History would judge them. Future generations would debate whether they were heroes or villains. But those future generations would exist. That was all that mattered. The fleet launched 3 hours later, 50 ships cutting through the darkness toward a battle that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. On each ship, crews prepared weapons that had never been tested in combat. They checked ammunition that could crack planets. They ran simulations of tactics designed to kill things that bent reality itself. And in the command bunker beneath the mountains, Rita Foster watched the fleet depart and prayed to a god she no longer believed in. Not for victory, not for mercy, just for the strength to do what needed to be done. The Varith system looked peaceful from a distance. 3 inhabited worlds orbiting a yellow star that had burned steadily for 4 billion years. Captain David Wells studied the tactical display from the command deck of a UES Indomitable, humanity's first dreadnought, and tried to see what the sensors were telling him. 2 of those worlds were fragmenting, their surfaces breaking apart like thin ice over dark water. The third showed gravitational anomalies forming at its core. Contact in 30 minutes, his tactical officer reported. Lieutenant Sarah Kim had served under Wells for 8 years, had trained on weapon systems that officially didn't exist. Her voice remained steady, professional, but Wells saw the tension in her shoulders. They were about to fight something that had destroyed 4 worlds without breaking a sweat. All ships, battle formation Delta 7. Weapons free on my command only. Wells transmitted the order across the fleet channel, watching as 49 other warships maneuvered into position. The formation was designed for fighting enemy fleets, adapted on the fly, for fighting something they didn't understand. The unraveling appeared on sensors 12 minutes ahead of schedule. Wells had read the reports, studied the data, watched the recordings from dying worlds. Nothing prepared him for seeing them in person. They looked like tears in reality itself. Massive shapes that hurt to look at directly. Space folded around them in ways that made no geometric sense. Light bent at impossible angles. The sensors reported 7 distinct entities, each one larger than a city, each one radiating energy signatures that redlined every instrument. Sir, they're approaching the third planet. Estimated time to planetary penetration, 6 minutes. Wells made his decision. All ships, arm relativistic kinetics. Target the nearest entity. Fire on my mark. Helen Cross appeared on his command screen, transmitting from her shuttle that had just arrived in system. Her face was pale but determined. Captain, the Galactic defense fleets are here too. They're demanding you stand down. Tell them to help or get out of the way. They won't help. They're threatening to open fire on us if we engage. Wells looked at the tactical display. 15 galactic ships surrounded the human fleet, their weapons systems active. Not enough to stop them, but enough to complicate things badly. Below, on the third planet, 6 billion people continue their daily lives, unaware that death was approaching from above. Tactical, keep solutions on the unraveling entities. Helm, if the galactic ships fire, evasive pattern Omega. We shoot past them, not through them. Sir, they're hailing us directly. Wells accepted the connection. A Coral commander appeared, her expression sorrowful. Captain Wells, you must not do this. Violence against sentient beings violates every principle our civilizations hold sacred. Stand down and let us attempt communication. How's that working out for the 4 dead worlds? Wells asked. We do not know that violence would have saved them. We only know that violence breeds more violence. Please, give us time. The sensor screamed in alarm. The unraveling entities had reached the planet's atmosphere. Wells watched in horror as reality twisted, as the planet's surface began to fold in on itself. In the cities below, billions of people suddenly understood that something was very wrong. All ships fire. 20 relativistic missiles launched simultaneously, accelerating to 90% light speed in seconds. They crossed the distance to the nearest unraveling entity in the time it took Wells to draw breath. The impact released energy equivalent to a solar flare, concentrated into a space smaller than a football field. The entity screamed. Wells felt it through the ship's hull, through the deck plates, through his bones. A sound that existed in dimensions humans couldn't perceive, transmitted through quantum fields and gravitational waves. The sensors registered it as a distortion in space-time itself. Whatever these things were, they could feel pain. The entity fractured, its impossible geometry breaking apart into fragments that dissolved into radiation. 6 remained. Target destroyed, Kim reported, her voice shaking. Remaining entities are pulling back from the planet. They're regrouping. The galactic ships were shouting across every channel, demanding cessation of hostilities, threatening sanctions and expulsion. Wells ignored them. Quantum disruption warheads, full spread. Target the cluster. The warheads were humanity's most forbidden weapon, devices that destabilize the quantum fields holding matter together. The weapons prohibition accords listed them as crimes against existence itself. Wells authorized their launch without hesitation. The warheads detonated in a cascade, each explosion triggering quantum collapse in an expanding sphere. The unraveling entities tried to fold space and escape, but the disruption followed them through whatever dimensions they inhabited. 2 more entities died, their death screams harmonizing in a chorus of cosmic agony. For remaining, Kim said, they're retreating toward the edge of the system. Pursue, Wells ordered. Don't let them escape to threaten other worlds. Helen's voice cut through the command chatter. David, you did it. 3 worlds are intact. The gravitational anomalies are stabilizing. You saved 6 billion people. Wells looked at the tactical display, at the remaining unraveling entities fleeing into deep space, at the galactic ships that had done nothing while worlds died. He felt no victory, Only exhaustion and the sick certainty that this was just the beginning. Fleet status: no losses. Minor damage to the destroyer Pacific. All systems operational. Maintain pursuit for another 10 minutes. Then break off and establish defensive positions around the inhabited worlds. I want constant sensor sweeps for any sign of their return. The human fleet moved in perfect coordination, each ship executing its role in the deadly ballet of warfare. The remaining unraveling entities jumped to faster-than-light travel, vanishing from sensors. They were gone, but Wells knew they would return. Things like that didn't give up. Helen arrived on the Indomitable 2 hours later, shuttling over while the galactic community screamed for human blood on every communication channel. She found Wells in his ready room, staring at the casualty reports. 0 human deaths. 6 billion aliens saved. 4 entities destroyed. They're calling us war criminals, Helen said quietly. Murderers of sentient beings. The Assembly has convened an emergency session. They want you arrested. Did they offer an alternative plan? Wells asked. Any suggestions for how we might have saved those worlds without violence? No. Wells nodded. Then they can add my name to their list of monsters. At least those 6 billion people will live to debate the ethics. They're frightened, David. They've never seen warfare on this scale. They don't understand. They understand perfectly, Wells interrupted. They understand that we're willing to do what they want. That makes us dangerous. More dangerous than the unraveling in their minds. Helen sat down across from him. Was it worth it? Wells thought about the screaming entities, the quantum disruptions, the terrible power they had unleashed. Then he thought about 6 billion people waking up tomorrow, alive because someone made the hard choice. Ask me again when the next world starts dying, he said. And we have to decide if we'll do it again. The trial chamber had been built for occasions of great importance, debates that shaped galactic policy for generations. Helen Cross stood at its center, surrounded by 1,000 delegates from species that spanned the full spectrum of galactic civilization. Above her, holographic displays showed the evidence of humanity's crimes. The destruction of 4 unraveling entities. The use of prohibited weapons. The violation of treaties that had maintained peace for millennia. She wore her human diplomatic uniform, simple and unadorned, and met their accusing stares without flinching. They could judge her all they wanted. 6 billion people were alive because of what the fleet had done. Chair Paven spoke from his elevated position, his ancient voice carrying across the chamber. Ambassador Helen Cross, you stand accused of authorizing acts of violence against sentient beings, violating the Weapons Prohibition Accords, and endangering galactic peace. How do you plead? Not guilty, Helen said clearly. And I'd do it again. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in 40 languages, their translators creating a cacophony of outrage and disbelief. Pavin raised his hand, and the chamber reluctantly fell silent. You admit to authorizing the use of forbidden weapons, yet claim innocence. I claim necessity, Helen replied. You had 800 years of warnings. 800 years to prepare, to build defenses, to create evacuation protocols. What did you do? You debated. You philosophized. You censored your own historical records because the truth was uncomfortable. And while you talked, 4 worlds died. 18 billion people turned to dust and radiation. A Dravenite scholar stood, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns of disapproval. Violence is never the answer. The unraveling entities may have been reasoned with, communicated with. They were consuming a planet, Helen interrupted. 6 billion people had 6 minutes to live. Please explain your communication protocol for that situation. The Dravenite had no answer. Dr. Zhao appeared on a holographic display, transmitting from her research station. Her arrival had been timed perfectly. Honorable delegates, I have new evidence regarding the nature of the unraveling entities. Paven looked displeased, but allowed her to continue. Zhao pulled up data streams, analysis results, fragments of the precursor archives that had been hidden for generations. The unraveling is not a natural phenomenon. It's a weapon system created approximately 2 million years ago by a species called the Architects. They achieved technological transcendence and became paranoid that younger species might surpass them. So they built an automated defense system. Every 50,000 years, it activates and eliminates any civilization that has reached a threshold level of advancement. The chamber fell into shocked silence. Zhao continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing. The complete warning was in the precursor archives. But your ancestors, the elder species, chose to redact it. They couldn't accept that their pacifist philosophy had a fatal flaw. They believed that if they avoided violence long enough, the problem would resolve itself peacefully. It didn't. It never would have. Helen watched the delegates' faces as understanding dawned. Horror, shame, denial, all the emotions of people confronting a truth they had spent centuries avoiding. The unraveling will return, Zhao said. My analysis shows 19 more target zones across the galaxy. Worlds that will be attacked within the next 3 months. Unless someone stops it. Paven looked older suddenly, the weight of millennia pressing down on him. Even if this is true, violence against sentient beings, they're not sentient, Zhao interrupted. I analyzed the quantum signatures from the destroyed entities. They're machines. Sophisticated, adaptive, but still machines. The architects built them to mimic life, to make younger species hesitate, to make you choose philosophy over action. And it worked perfectly for 50,000 years. A young delegate from the Sarin Federation stood, his voice shaking. If this is true, if the unraveling is a weapon designed to destroy us, then Ambassador Cross was right. We should have been preparing. We should have been building defenses. It's not too late, Helen said. The human fleet is ready to continue operations. We'll protect your worlds, evacuate your people, fight the battles you can't. But I need something from you. What? Paven asked. Authorization. Legitimacy. The human fleet can operate alone, but will be more effective with galactic support. Medical ships. Evacuation transport. Intelligence sharing. And most importantly, I need you to start preparing your own defenses. Because humanity can't be everywhere at once. The chamber dissolved into heated debate. The younger species, those who had joined the galactic community in the last few centuries, sided with humanity. They understood that survival sometimes required uncomfortable choices. The elder species resisted, clinging to principles that had defined their civilizations for millennia. The vote was called. Helen watched the holographic tally climb, watched as the galaxy split along lines of philosophy and pragmatism. The younger species voted yes. The elder species voted no. The middle ground species agonized over their choice. The final count appeared. 523 in favor of authorizing human military operations, for 198 against. The galaxy had spoken, barely. Helen felt no satisfaction, only grim determination. They had authorization, but the opposition would undermine them at every opportunity. And she knew from bitter experience that half-hearted support was often worse than outright resistance. Then the alarm sounded. Emergency broadcasts flooded every display in the chamber. Multiple unraveling signatures detected. The assembly world itself, the seat of galactic government, was under attack. Sensor data showed a massive swarm of entities materializing in orbit, dozens of them, more than had ever appeared in one location. The chamber descended into panic. Delegates scrambled for escape pods, for shuttle bays, for any way off the planet before the gravitational anomalies began. But Helen knew it was already too late. The entities were too many, too close. The planet's shields were failing. She opened a direct channel to the human fleet. Captain Wells, this is Ambassador Cross. The assembly world is under attack. How fast can you get here? Wells' voice came back immediately. We're 3 hours out. Can you hold that long? Helen looked at the tactical displays, at the entities descending toward the planet's surface, at the defense systems that had never been designed for actual warfare. She looked at the delegates, fleeing in terror, the same people who had condemned humanity for its violence. We don't have 3 hours, she said quietly. But come anyway. Someone needs to survive to remember what happened here. The transmission cut out as the first gravitational anomalies reached the planet's surface. The chamber shook, reality bending in ways that made Helen's stomach rebel. Through the transparent walls, she watched the sky tear open. The unraveling had come for those who refused to fight, and humanity was racing through the void, 3 hours too far away to help. The Indomitable dropped out of faster-than-light travel at maximum combat speed, the ship's frame groaning under forces that pushed the structural limits. Captain David Wells absorbed the tactical situation in 3 seconds. 57 unraveling entities surrounding the assembly world, planetary shields at 15%, evacuation ships fleeing in all directions while the entities picked them off like insects. All ships, emergency combat dispersal. Target priority to entities attacking evacuation craft. Go loud and go violent. Wells didn't wait for confirmation. Knew his captains would execute without hesitation. They had drilled for this. The nightmare scenario. Too many enemies, too little time, civilians dying with every second wasted. The human fleet tore into the swarm like wolves among sheep. Relativistic missiles crossed the void at near light speed, each impact releasing enough energy to vaporize a mountain. Quantum disruption warheads created cascading failures in reality itself, and the unraveling entities screamed, their death cries resonating across dimensions humans couldn't perceive. But there were too many. For every entity destroyed, 3 more focused their attention on the human ships. Space folded around the destroyer Pacific, reality collapsing inward. The ship's hull crumpled like paper, 200 crew members dying instantly. The cruiser Defiant followed, seconds later, caught in a gravitational anomaly that compressed it to the size of a baseball. "We're not going to make it," Lieutenant Kim said quietly, watching the casualty report scroll across her screen. "We can't kill them fast enough." Wells knew she was right. They had slowed the assault, saved thousands of evacuation ships, but the assembly world was still dying. The planet's core was destabilizing, gravitational anomalies spreading across the surface like cancer. Millions were trapped in the cities below, unable to reach the evacuation points before the planet tore itself apart. Dr. Zhao's voice cut through the command channel, transmitted from her lab aboard the research vessel Discovery. "Captain, I have a solution. It's going to sound insane. All my options sound insane right now. Talk." The entities are quantum entangled. They share information instantaneously across the swarm. That's how they coordinate. If we can disrupt that entanglement, create enough quantum noise, they'll lose cohesion. How do we create quantum noise? Zhao's voice was steady, but Wells heard the fear underneath. Detonate a quantum disruption warhead inside the planet's core. The shockwave will propagate through the local quantum field, severing the entanglement. The entities will become disorganized, vulnerable. Wells understood immediately. That will kill everyone on the surface. Most of them are dead already, David. The core is failing. The planet has maybe 20 minutes before it tears itself apart naturally. This way, at least we save the evacuation ships, and we destroy the swarm. Wells looked at the tactical display. 60,000 people on the surface, trapped in shelters that wouldn't survive the gravitational collapse. 300,000 in evacuation ships, still within the kill zone. And 54 unraveling entities that would continue to spread across the galaxy if they escaped this system. It was the Antarctic Cascade all over again. Impossible choix. Terrible mathematics. Save some by sacrificing others. "I can't make this call," Wells said. "I need authorization." "There's no time for authorization. You're the senior officer on site. The decision is yours." Private Amara Diallo stood from her station at the back of the command deck. The young soldier had been quiet throughout the battle, monitoring communications, coordinating with the evacuation ships. Now she spoke clearly, loudly, cutting through the chaos. "I'll do it, sir. I'll take the warhead down." Wells turned to look at her. "You understand what you're volunteering for?" "Yes, sir." "The automated systems won't work. Too much quantum interference from the entities. Someone has to manually place the device at the exact core coordinates. and they won't make it out before detonation. Your family. My mom survived the cascade by making hard choices. So did you. So did everyone who lived through those years. This is my choice, sir. Let me make it count. Wells wanted to refuse, wanted to find another option, wanted to be the kind of captain who never sacrificed his crew. But he had learned during the cascade that sometimes the right choice felt like murder. And sometimes letting someone volunteer was harder than ordering them to their death. Kim, prep Shuttle 7 with a quantum disruption device. Diallo, you have 15 minutes to reach the surface and deploy. Amara Diallo saluted, turned, and ran for the shuttle bay. Wells watched her go and felt something break inside his chest. She was 23 years old. She had survived the cascade as a child, grown up in the harsh world that followed, joined the fleet to protect others. And now she was going to die, saving people who had condemned humanity for its violence. The next 12 minutes lasted forever. Wells coordinated the fleet's assault, pulling back the evacuation ships beyond the predicted shockwave radius. They destroyed entity after entity, taking losses that would have crippled any other fleet. The battleship Resolute took a direct hit, its entire forward section torn away. The frigate Courage vanished into a dimensional fold, gone so completely that sensors couldn't even detect debris. Diallo's voice came through, calm despite the hell around her. I'm at the core coordinates. The entities know I'm here. They're trying to stop me, but I'm faster. Arming the device now. Amara, well started. Tell my mom I did it right, sir. Tell her I made the choice that mattered. The device detonated with a force that rewrote the laws of physics in a sphere 500 kilometers across. The quantum field collapsed, then exploded outward in a wave of cascading disruption. The unraveling entities, their quantum entanglement severed, lost cohesion simultaneously. They didn't scream this time. They simply stopped existing, their impossible geometries collapsing into radiation and scattered particles. The assembly world shattered, its core released in a burst of energy that lit up the system like a second sun. 60,000 people died in an instant, their final thoughts lost to the void. But 300,000 evacuation ships escaped, carrying survivors who would remember this day forever. Wells stood on the command deck of the Indomitable, surrounded by the debris of a planet and the corpses of his crew, and felt the weight of command crushing him. They had won. The unraveling swarm was destroyed. The survivors were safe, and all it had cost was a world and the lives of those willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Helen Cross appeared on a screen, her face streaked with tears. She's gone. Along with the 60,000 we couldn't evacuate. But we saved 300,000, and we destroyed the swarm. Helen nodded slowly. The galaxy is calling us monsters again. Criminals, destroyers of worlds. What do you think? Wells asked quietly. Helen looked at something off-screen, perhaps at the evacuation ships finding safety, perhaps at the memorial being prepared for the dead. I think Amara Diallo was 23 years old, and she saved 300,000 lives. I think that matters more than whatever they call us. Wells disconnected and looked at his surviving crew. They were battered, traumatized, grieving, but they were alive. And somewhere in the evacuation fleet, 300,000 people were alive because of choices that would haunt humanity forever. 6 months had changed the galaxy in ways that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Helen Cross walked through the memorial garden on Mars, where 50,000 names were carved into black stone. Human names, soldiers and civilians who had given everything to protect worlds that weren't their own. She stopped at one name in particular. Amara Diallo, Private First Class, died saving 300,000 lives at the Battle of Assembly's fall. The galaxy had transformed around them. 37 worlds saved from the unraveling. 12 million casualties, most of them human volunteers who stayed behind during evacuations, who flew damaged ships on suicide runs, who detonated warheads manually when automated systems failed. The younger species of the galactic community had militarized, training with human advisors, building defense fleets modeled on Earth's designs. The elder species remained in philosophical retreat, though individuals had quietly joined the war effort, unable to reconcile their principles with their continued existence. Admiral Rita Foster found Helen at the memorial, the old woman moving slowly, but with the same iron determination that had carried her through the worst years of the Cascade. They stood together in silence, reading names carved in stone, each one representing a choice made and a life ended. "The final target has been identified," Rita said quietly. Dr. Zhao tracked the quantum signatures to their source. A megastructure orbiting a dead star in the Perseus arm. It's manufacturing more unraveling entities. As long as it exists, this never ends. How do we destroy it? We built something new. The UES Absolute. A ship designed for one purpose. To reach that megastructure and eliminate it. No matter the cost. Helen understood immediately. A one-way mission. Captain Wells volunteered to command it. He's assembling a crew from volunteers only. People who understand they probably won't come back. Helen thought about David Wells, the man who had made impossible decisions at the Battle of Assembly's Fall, who carried the weight of every death on his conscience. Of course he had volunteered. Men like him didn't know how to live with guilt. They only knew how to transform it into purpose. The Absolute launched 3 weeks later from Luna shipyards, the largest warship humanity had ever constructed. Its design was brutal and efficient. Engines, weapons, and a quantum disruption device large enough to crack a moon. No luxuries, no extra systems, nothing that didn't serve the single purpose of reaching the target and destroying it. Wells commanded from the bridge with a crew of 800 volunteers. They jumped to faster-than-light travel and vanished into the deep black, racing toward a weapon system that had murdered civilizations for 2 million years. Helen returned to the rebuilt assembly, now relocated to a fortified station near the galactic core. The delegates who survived the fall had been changed by their experience, their philosophical certainty replaced with the hard-earned wisdom of those who had faced death and lived. Chair Pavan was gone, killed when the assembly world shattered. His replacement was a younger Coral named Saran, who had fought alongside human troops during the evacuation. The assembly chamber was different now. Less ornate, more practical. Security stations at every entrance. Tactical displays showing fleet positions and unraveling activity. It looked like a war room because that's what it had become. Saran called the session to order. "We have lost much in these months. Worlds, lives, innocence. But we have gained something as well. We have learned that survival sometimes requires us to set aside our ideals and do what is necessary. Ambassador Cross, your species has paid the highest price in this war. Humanity has lost more people defending our worlds than we have lost ourselves. For this, we owe you a debt that cannot be repaid." Helen stood. "We didn't do it for debt. We did it because no one else would. Which is precisely why we must change," Saran replied. "The Assembly proposes a new structure. A High Council with permanent seats for species who demonstrate both wisdom and the willingness to act. Earth will be offered the position of guardian, not as members who debate and vote, but as protectors who defend when defense is needed." Helen looked around the chamber, seeing the faces of delegates who had once condemned humanity for its violence. Now they understood. Sometimes protection required violence. Sometimes survival required sacrifice. Sometimes doing the right thing meant living with choices that would haunt you forever. "We accept," Helen said, "on one condition. Name it. Never again do we ignore warnings. Never again do we wait until worlds are dying. And never again do we ask others to do what we won't do ourselves. If humanity becomes a guardian, then every species must contribute. Ships, soldiers, resources. We'll lead the fight, but we won't fight alone." The vote was unanimous. The age of philosophical contemplation was over. The age of vigilance had begun. 2 months later, Wells transmitted from the Perseus arm. The Absolute had reached the megastructure, a construct the size of a small moon, its surface covered in construction bays, producing unraveling entities. The battle had been fierce. The ship was damaged, half the crew dead, but they had fought through the automated defenses and reached the core. "This is Captain David Wells of the UES Absolute." His voice crackled across the quantum communicator. We're preparing to detonate the quantum disruption device. The explosion will destroy the megastructure and eliminate the unraveling threat permanently. To everyone listening, we did what had to be done. No regrets. Helen watched from the assembly chamber as the signal cut out. 30 seconds later, sensors detected a massive quantum disruption in the Perseus arm. The megastructure was gone, vaporized in an explosion that briefly outshone the local star. She waited, hoping against hope for another transmission, for word that Wells and his crew had somehow survived. But deep down she knew the Absolute had been built for one purpose, and that purpose was complete. 3 days later, a battered escape pod emerged from faster-than-light travel near Mars. Wells and 300 survivors, half the crew, had made it out. Barely. The ship's AI had calculated an escape trajectory with a 3% survival probability, and they had beaten the odds through skill and desperation. Helen met them at the medical station, watching as the survivors were carried out on stretchers, their bodies broken but alive. Wells saw her and managed a weak smile. "We killed it," he said. "The unraveling is over." "At what cost?" Wells looked at the memorial garden visible through the viewport, at the names carved in stone, at the empty spaces waiting for new names to be added. "The same cost we always pay. Everything we can afford and some things we can't. But the galaxy survives. That's what matters." Helen took his hand. "Then we survive too, and we make sure their sacrifice meant something." The galaxy had learned a terrible lesson in 6 months of war. Warnings meant nothing without the will to act. Philosophy meant nothing without the strength to fight. And sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and extinction was the willingness to do what others couldn't. Humanity had become the guardian not because they wanted power, but because they understood the weight of responsibility. They had survived the cascade by making impossible choices. Now, they would protect the galaxy by making those same choices over and over for as long as necessary. The age of peace through inaction was dead. The age of peace through strength had begun, and humanity stood at its center, carrying the burden that no other species would bear.